What's up, guys? Step-by-step tutorial. Today's an exciting day. Name is Alex Louie. I'm going to teach you how to interact with your smart contract from the client side. So we are going to, 1, install our dApp browser called MetaMask. 2, we're going to connect our MetaMask to test our PC. 3, we're going to create a simple contract called Professor. And 4, we're going to create 2 files, an HTML and a JavaScript file, which will be our front-end interface to our smart contract, and we're going to call 1 or 2 functions and listen for an event. So let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is go into chrome.google.com/web store /category /extensions. Okay, and if you haven't done so already, do that now. And then when you go into the Chrome Web Store, you will go on the search extensions and just type in MetaMask. So MetaMask, do that. So once you do that, it should be the first link with the little fox there, and we're going to add this to Chrome. So we're going to click on Add to Chrome. It's going to say yes, and add an extension. Okay, and then you see it pop up. Okay, so now that we have the MetaMask extension popped up, we're going to click on the MetaMask, and it's going to ask you to accept all the privacy notice and all that. So we're going to click accept. We're going to scroll down, click accept, and then it's going to ask you to create your den. So your den is going to be sort of a storage of accounts that you're going to hold with MetaMask. So for this particular one, create a password, something that you will remember, write it down so you can create a den. So I'm going to create a test MetaMask den. I already have one, so this is just a test one that I'm using. Okay, so for my password, I'm just going to create, just going to type in my password. Do that. Okay, and that's pretty cool how the fox looks. So you click on create, and you're gonna get something called seed words. So what I need you to do is actually copy these seed words and save them somewhere where you'll have them handy. Okay, and also save them where you're always gonna, because now once you create this den, this is basically going to be your gateway to your dApp whenever you want to interact with it, because it's going to read from your test RPC for the accounts that you have available. Okay, well, I'm going to connect to it in a minute. So save these words. It's basically a key to restore your MetaMask accounts. Okay, and they should be secret. It should be secret. Nobody should be able to see these aside from yourself. Okay, so you see it says vault created. Okay, so I'm going to click on I've copied them somewhere safe. Okay, you should see that on the main network it's going to be a test account which you created on the main network, and you should have obviously no ether. Okay, now in later activities you may want to import a key. So maybe you have a Coinbase account and you want to import the Coinbase account into here, into your MetaMask, and that's perfectly fine, because then that way supposedly your Coinbase account will have some ether, and then you can interact with other dApps. But for now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna click on this little arrow here, and basically these are all the networks that are available to us to connect to. So the main Ethereum network, that's the production one, and then you got a couple of test ones, and then you have a custom RPC. So Robton Test Network, Kovan, and Rinkeby. So what we're gonna do is we're actually going to connect to our local host. Now how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is actually open up a DOS window. Okay, and once you open up a DOS window, what you're gonna do, and if you haven't seen my video already, please make sure you've seen my video on how to install TestRPC. So you should already have TestRPC on your machine. So you're gonna type in TestRPC /m Then you're gonna open your quotes, and you remember those seed words I had you copy down. You're gonna actually copy and paste them over here. Okay, so this is gonna test our PC to interact with MetaMask on your browser. It's gonna test our PC to interact with MetaMask on your browser with that vault. So I'm gonna press enter. Okay, and you should see a mnemonic. You should say listening. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to copy and paste all this stuff somewhere where I can keep it handy. Okay, and now we're pretty much running a blockchain on our PC. So what we want to do next is we actually want to change this to localhost. Okay, and if you did it right and you change it to localhost, you should see an account 1 that has 100 ether. Okay, and account 1 has it because now we're connected to our localhost account. Okay, so all these accounts are gonna have, if we scroll up, all these accounts are gonna have 100 ether, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so now if you see you copy address to the clipboard, okay, your address that you've copied should match this address here, the 0x1f441. Okay, so now we're running test-rpc to interact with our MetaMask, and we're good so far. Now the next thing we want to do is we actually are going to create a contract, and we're going to interact with it. So let's create a quick, simple, this is my professor contract. So I'm going to create a professor contract, and while I type it out, I will pause the video so that I don't waste too much time just typing all this stuff out. Alright, so I've typed in my contract here. Has 4 state variables, an owner address variable, and I also created an event which will catch any event whenever they set my professor variables here, and we'll take a look at the functions that I wrote. So this constructor will make anybody that deploys this, which is going to be me, as the owner. Okay, as the owner. And we also created a set professor function which has 3 parameters passed in: underscore fname, underscore lname, underscore id. Make it public, and that's just gonna set our variable names, our state variable names in our professor contract. And I also want to notify when this actually gets written on the blockchain. So that's why I created an event. So this event will get passed in the parameters that are coming in: fname, lname, and id. So when it gets written on the blockchain, I'm gonna get a notification of the event once I'm listening to it, and I can catch whatever value that's being thrown in here. Okay, alright, so now what we want to do is we want to set up our environment to deploy this not to the JavaScript VM, but we actually want to deploy this to the test RPC. So what we want to do is now we're going to click on where it says environment and click on injected web3. Okay, clicked on injected web3, and then let's see, actually let's refresh this because it looks like it's not picking up the accounts from our MetaMask. So let's do that. Let's do that. So we go here. Okay, now I picked it up. So if you see your account not being picked up, you should see once you click on injected web3, you will see the account, the 1F4 that you have 1F441. Now again, my accounts are going to be different than yours, but you just make sure that it has 100 ether. So with our injected Web3, that's actually connecting to your test RPC. It's connecting to your test RPC. The next thing we want to do is we actually are going to deploy this to your test RPC. Okay, but before we do that, actually, we are going to take some of this information to set up our client. Okay, we want to take some of this information and set up our client. The first thing we want to do is when we go to compile, okay, we want to click on details. And when we click on details, we actually want to scroll down and we actually want to get the ABI, which is the interface we're going to use to interact with our contract. So what I usually do is I just copy this line here under web deploy. Okay, I'm going to copy that, save it somewhere where you're going to be able to access it again. Okay, because we will access it again once we are ready to interact with it. Okay, so that's what we just copied, is called the ABI, and that ABI is going to be used for us to interact with it through our JavaScript interface. Okay, so now once we do that, then we've copied the ABI. Now we can just deploy. So if we click on create, okay, you should have a MetaMask pop-up come up. So let's do that, and it's going to tell you how much the contract costs to deploy to your test RPC. So this contract costs 27 cents for me to deploy, 0.000286 ether. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click OK, and if you did it right, you should see that the transaction was mined. Okay, so what I'm going to do is you can either copy the address from here. Okay, so this contract created, that's the contract address, or I can just copy the contract address from here. So I'm going to copy this value to some type of pad. Okay, so this is your contract address, and we also copied our ABI. So now this contract currently exists on our test RPC blockchain, and you see block number 1, how much gas it used to mine that block on test RPC. Okay, now once we do that, we are going to work on the client side. We're going to work on the client side. It's a simple client. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you here. So this is a Hello World dApp. What I've done is I've included the Bootstrap framework here. Okay, and you can do this on your own. I'm just including because it's the simplest one to do. And then the fonts for Google APIs, I guess that's needed by Bootstrap. And then now I have a body class container. It's called a simple professor application, and I'm going to have a button that updates instructor. Okay, so when I click on that button, I'm gonna be able to update my instructor. So what I'm gonna be able to do is I'm actually going to call my set professor function, and within the code I will hard code the values to call that set professor function. So the other thing after your body, okay, is you should have a reference to web3.js, okay, and then you should also have a reference to Jquery, which is what I'm using. Okay, this may be the pretty old version, but it doesn't really matter. I find Jquery is the easiest to use test examples. I'm more of a fan of using Angular. Angular can get quite tricky to set that up, so I will have more videos on Angular. I could create a whole video, a whole course on Angular. So, and that's in the works. So, and then aside from your Jquery reference, then you're going to have professor.js, which is a file that is our JavaScript file. So this is going to be our logic file that interacts with the contract. It's going to be the file that interacts with the contract. So now that we have all that, okay, this is going to be our HTML. We need the professor.js. It's going to be in the same directory, okay, underneath. Okay, so if we look at professor.js, you're going to notice a couple things. So the first thing is we're going to declare a Web3 provider, and we're going to instantiate it, call it new Web3 HTTP provider, and we're going to pass it in our local host because that's where our test RPC is running. So it's going to connect to our test RPC node. Okay, and then we're just going to log it to the console, who a provider is, just for logging purposes. And this one here is where I told you to copy the ABI. You remember copying the ABI. So if you did so, you should have a line, okay, that you copied that looks like that, right? So I'm going to comment this out, and I'm actually just going to copy anything from the bracket open to the closed bracket. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to replace whatever's in here, okay, with our ABI. So under JSON.parse, you're going to have a single quote. You're going to have all this for our ABI. Okay, for our ABI. So that's the interface, application binary interface to our contract. Okay, and if you see a couple things, it looks like a little bit like I think it is JSON, which says the name of our contract, professor, statement of ability non-payable function, and then inputs, fname, okay, and then set professor, so it tells you the name of the function. So it's an interface. It's an interface to our contract that we're going to use. Then we're going to declare an instance of our contract within our JavaScript file, and we're going to use something called web3. So web3.eth.contract ABI. So the ABI is our interface. That's our interface to the contract. Okay, that's our interface to the contract. And this is very important. So now we declare a contract instance variable, and from our particular professor contract that we got from the ABI, we're going to indicate where the address was mined. Okay, so this is the address of the contract of where it was mined. So what you should do is grab what I asked you to copy from Remix and paste it in here. Okay, and if you missed that step, I'll do it again. So if we go back here, you're going to copy this value. Okay, and that's it. Alright, to continue on, and we have our document.ready function, which is Jquery. Okay, and we're going to take the contract instance variable that we got, which points to the address of our contract, and say .professor.event.watch. So what this function does is it actually is going to watch my contract event. So if we look at Remix, actually let me do this. Okay, I'm watching this event. That's what I'm doing. I'm watching the event. So if we go back, okay, so it's gonna watch function, and then I have two parameters. So if it does an error, then I'm gonna write the response back to the log, to the console.log. Okay, so because this is returning back it's not returning, but it's going to get passed in 3 values. So I can say result.args.firstName. Okay, so that will give me, go back to Remix, that will give me the first name here. Okay, so I can also do last name and then college ID, which are in turn passed in from set professor. Now, that's a watch. It's a watch. So remember, that doesn't mean that it's going to get triggered immediately. We actually have to trigger this by calling the setProfessor function. So what do? Is we're going to bind a click function to our button, okay, over here. So this button ID called button, okay, we're going to bind it with a function that when they click on it, we're going to grab our contract instance and call the setProfessor function. We're going to pass it in 3 parameters. I'm going to say Billy, Louis, and our ID. And then, alright, so we have contract instance as setProfessor, and then there's 2 other parameters that we need to pass in, which is the accounts from our test RPC. So if you say web3.eth.account0, it indicates the 0th account, which has the 100 ether. And then comma, you're going to pass in another callback. I think that's a callback function from the contract that you called. So I think we're all set up. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring up the browser and we're going to look at the blockchain and see what happens, okay? And then we should be able to interact with our contract. So let's take a look. Alright, so now I have my front end. All I did was I just copied where my HTML file was into my browser. So if we look at my directory here, all I did was just drag this over into my Chrome browser. Okay, so if you don't know how to do that, just grab it, drag it into your Chrome browser. It should just open up. The other thing that I've done is I opened up developer tools. So if you go into I think it's top right, go to more tools, developer tools, the one with the 3 dots. Okay, you should see this. So this is going to be your console and stuff that I wrote to the console. So I'm going to update instructor with Billy Louis. Okay, Billy Louis. And then once I update instructor, when I trigger the event on the contract, it's going to respond back once the block is mined. And when it gets responded back, because I have a watch on that event, I'm going to write the first name from that event that came in on the block. Okay, so let's do that. So if I update instructor, okay, see that just got written to the blockchain. Block 4 cost me 53,000 gas, and then you see that Billy came back, okay, from the contract. So congratulations, you just wrote your first dApp where you have a client and then you also have the server side. So now if I wanted to write the additional variables, so let's say I want to write the last name as well as the ID. Okay, so all these 3 are coming from my contract. Okay, so if I go back and go over here, I'm getting my first name, my last name, and my college ID. Okay, which are first name, last name, and my college ID, which are coming from my event. Okay, so I'm accessing these event variables. So if we go back, actually this should be that college ID, so that matches with my event here. Okay, so if I do that, I'm going to save this. Okay, and let's take a look at our browser again. Okay, so now we're going to update instructor again, and let's see, so the blockchain should still be running, so I'm going to click that. Okay, and there it is, it's written. Okay, and then I'm gonna see it took a little while to get back, so now I'm gonna get it back. Okay, I got Billy Louis and big number, which is coming in, so you should get back 1 2 3 4. So if we look at what we wrote, okay, so 1 2 3 4, it comes back as a big number, I guess JSON response. Okay, so again, you can pass in anything you want to your contract. Okay, So if I was doing this set professor and I was getting values from a text box, then I can just put in the values in here and set them up. Okay, just remember that when you call the function, you have to indicate what account you want to use from Web3 ETH account 0. So that would be your first Ether account. So if we go back, you're going to notice that we wasted a little bit of Ether here from our test account. Wasted a little bit of Ether from our test account. Okay, so you always are going to waste Ether when you're going to run a dApp. You're always going to waste Ether when you run a dApp. And that's perfectly okay. I mean, that's basically what the whole concept is you as a user have the onus of wasting the Ether to interact with the dApp. So nothing's free. Nothing in this life is free. Alright, so hopefully you learned how to interact with your contract through the client side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to publish these files on the YouTube video, and this way you can try it yourself, and then a couple of next videos will learn more into interacting with contracts and more concepts on contract development. Thanks again. Please subscribe to my channel if you like this channel. Again, I'll never put ads on any of my videos. Always free content. Always free content. Remember that. Want to contact me, parttimemagic@gmail.com, or you can always send me an email at parttimemagic@gmail.com, or go to my website, parttimemagic.com. Thanks a lot. See you next video.